It all started as usual. Peppa and George were playing with Evie, Peppa's younger sister.
Evie, George, let's build the tallest tower,
Suggested Peppa. Suddenly, Evie started complaining about stomach pain,
Don't worry, I'll help.
replied Mommy. Peppa and George looked at their sister with concern. Daddy Pig went to the kitchen for medicine. As he was about to return, suddenly the lights in the room went out.
Strange.
Said Daddy Pig. Suddenly, a huge black hand appeared from the darkness and grabbed him. When Daddy Pig didn't come back, Mommy Pig called Dr. Rabbit. She began examining her, but suddenly black, thin tentacles appeared from Evie's mouth.
Help!
Screamed Dr. Rabbit as Evie grabbed her and dragged her out of the nursery. Peppa and George watched in horror, unable to do anything. Meanwhile, Mommy Pig went down to the hall and stumbled upon a cocoon made of tentacles, in which Daddy Pig was barely visible. Suddenly, everything went dark again, and a second cocoon appeared nearby, this time with Mommy Pig inside. Now only Peppa and George remained in the nursery. No one could help them. They heard Evie's whisper approaching the door.
Evie?
Asked a frightened Peppa, looking toward the door. She appeared with a grim smile and completely black eyes, saying,
Now you are my toys.
Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Living Toy. George loved his dinosaur, but that day, the toy fell into a place where it shouldn't have gone. George didn't know some toys find their owners on their own. When George disappeared, Peppa decided to look for him, but she had no idea. She would have to search not for her brother, but for what had taken him. The trail led to the nursery, where it all began. The door to the nursery swung open, and Peppa saw a giant dinosaur holding George in its claws.
Give him back!
Peppa shouted, but the dinosaur already knew his name. Peppa tried to rescue her brother, but the dinosaur swatted her away with its tail. George mumbled. His voice sounded strange, as if the dinosaur was learning how to be him. Peppa grabbed a toy hammer and struck the dinosaur's paw. It dropped George.
Run!
Peppa yelled, but George didn't move. His eyes turned red. In the morning, George returned, but Peppa saw that now the dinosaur was always watching him. At night, a voice was heard behind the door.
The little dinosaur. Mine.
He waiting, because children can be lost so easily, especially when they think they've been found. Peppa finds an old, dusty toy box in the attic. Inside is a large doll with a porcelain face, but it doesn't have a face, just a smooth white oval. What a strange doll, says Peppa, looking at her. George looks at the doll with apprehension and hides behind his mother. At night, it seems to Peppa that the doll is looking at her. She hears quiet whispers from her room, even though no one is there. The next morning, the doll is in a different place. Peppa tries to get rid of the doll,
But it always comes back.
One day, while playing with George, Peppa draws the doll's face with a marker pen. At first, it's funny, but at night, the face on the doll changes. Now it's an evil grimace with sharp teeth and glowing red eyes. Peppa is terrified. She realizes that the doll is alive and something bad is happening. She runs to Mama Piggy, but she doesn't believe her. At night, Peppa wakes up from the cold. She sees a doll by her bed. The doll stretches its porcelain hand towards her. Peppa screams, but no one comes. In the morning, Peppa disappears. George is playing alone in the garden, but he is no longer grunting with joy. He holds a faceless doll in his hands. Piggy's mom and dad are standing at the window, their faces full of despair. Their voices are barely audible. Where is our Peppa? Peppa and George were playing hide and seek, just like always. George chose a cozy spot, a little further than usual. Peppa was walking through an empty hall. The house seemed frozen in time. George was hiding well, too well. Mommy Pig was washing the dishes, but her movements were a bit slowed down.
Mommy, George isn't coming out.
He always plays like that.
Peppa felt the presence of something supernatural. The wardrobe where George was hiding was now closer than before. George was always nearby, but he wasn't here. The game of hide and seek had long since crossed into another realm. Peppa approached the window. There was George. He was outside, looking at Peppa and trying to get her attention. Turning around, Peppa noticed that George was also inside. She went outside. The yard was empty. The grass was pressed down, as if someone had just left. But now, in the window, there was her, the one who hadn't come out. Peppa decided to go back home. The door creaked as if someone was pulling it at the same time she did. Something in the house had changed, like it was shrinking. The wardrobe remained, but it no longer hid anything. Peppa entered the kitchen. George sat with his back to her at the table. He was waiting, but something was wrong. His face was blurred. He whispered,
You lose. The game was over.
but had it ever really begun? It was an ordinary day.
Wow.
Grandpa brought the family an old television. It looked strange, but it immediately turned on. It was showing memories, happy and familiar. But sometimes there was something extra in these scenes. At night, Peppa woke up to a strange crackling sound. The TV turned on by itself. It showed Mom, but with eyes that looked empty, erased, just for a second. In the morning, the scene repeated. Only Peppa noticed. During the day, everything seemed normal. No one believed Peppa's stories. A little later, she saw Daddy Pig. He wasn't blinking. He was just staring.
See, Daddy, you see? Something's wrong.
Daddy Pig monotonously replied, We've all been here before. Peppa searched for an explanation. With each day, everything in the house became stranger. Peppa whispered,
Mom?
She answered emotionlessly.
Don't look for too long, Peppa. You'll see too much.
Daddy disappeared. The screen hummed as if it knew this would happen. Peppa decided to act. She pulled at the TV cord, but it sank into the floor and disappeared. The TV had never been plugged in, never before. Now it showed only fear and nothing else. On the screen, family members without faces, Peppa inside it. She screamed but made no sound. Peppa tore off George's toy hammer and struck the TV. The screen cracked. From inside, thick black liquid flowed out. Something unpleasant and dark seeped outward. The TV was gone, but distorted reflections remained. Some things don't turn off, even if the screen is no longer there. One word. It was an ordinary day. She was sitting in the playroom playing with a ball. Suddenly, it started rolling slowly across the floor by itself. She looked at it in surprise. The ball stopped near the wall, and suddenly a strange rustling sound was heard, like someone whispering behind her back. Peppa turned around. Nobody was there. Suddenly, the toys began to move on their own. Dolls swayed without wind. Cars rolled across the floor without her involvement. Peppa was frightened and looked into the mirror. Her reflection was terrifying. Her eyes darkened and her smile widened more than usual. Suddenly, the toys disappeared. The room grew darker. A shadow appeared in the mirror, rapidly approaching Peppa. She tried to turn away, but the mirror seemed to suck her inside. She didn't notice how she fell into it head first. Peppa found herself in a strange, dark cave. A piercing scream shattered the silence. Turning around, she saw many small, poor piglets who had been trapped there for several years. She realized that escaping on her own and rescuing these little ones was her mission. Illuminating the walls with a flashlight, she saw mysterious symbols resembling a cipher. She struggled for a long time to figure out how to rearrange the elements to form a word. Suddenly, it came to her. She quickly drew the symbols in the correct order and obtained the word love. Suddenly, the walls trembled, stones rained down, and the cave collapsed with a loud crash. The piglets were set free. They found themselves on a bright meadow bathed in sunlight. The little pigs thanked Peppa, and she rejoiced at her new friends. They were celebrating when they didn't notice someone watching them from behind a tree. Peppa and George carefully descended the stairs. They saw their parents, wounded and bitten, with dark green skin and spots all over their faces. They were surrounded by zombies. Mummy Pig weakly muttered.
Help! We couldn't escape.
Daddy Pig shouted with his last strength.
Run quickly!
The house filled with zombie pigs. It seemed there was no way out. Peppa remembered that there was a basement in the house. She quickly grabbed Evie, took George's hand, and they locked themselves inside, trying to catch their breath and calm down. The basement was dark and frightening. They pushed through cobwebs. From above, they could hear crashes and screams. They stayed there for several hours, passing the time by rummaging through old things out of boredom. Suddenly, George found a cassette labeled, "The Time Has Come." They found an old player and turned it on. They heard their grandfather's voice.
My little pigs, if you're listening to this recording, it means they've found you. The fate of our city is in your hands. In the basement was a secret laboratory. Press 3 palms against the wall. A control panel will open. The entry code is 7221. In my lab notebook, find recipe number 666. Only it can cure all those infected.
Peppa exclaimed.
That's the recipe! We need to mix these ingredients.
They set to work, and even the process seemed fun to them. After several hours, the potion was ready. Peppa poured the vaccine into bottles and distributed it to all the infected. Gradually, everyone began to revive. The spots disappeared, and their skin color returned to normal. The city thanked its saviors. The Peppa family decided to celebrate this day. They sat in the kitchen with a cake and tea. But suddenly, a familiar roar was heard.